The chopper cut through the gray Alaskan sky, blades beating a slow rhythm that echoed through the clouds. Below, the Kenai Peninsula stretched endlessly, a wilderness of pine, ice, and fog creeping low over the ridges. It looked peaceful from above, but Rico Smith knew better. He had spent 23 years tracking things that did not belong in peaceful places. He sat by the open door, goggles hanging around his neck, rifle balanced between his knees. Cold air tore at his jacket, but he barely felt it. He reached into his chest pocket and pulled out a photo. His wife, Marlene, stood smiling beside their old cabin, sunlight catching in her hair, their yellow lab asleep at her feet. On the back she had written, "One more, Rico. Then peace." That word haunted him more than any monster ever had. Peace. He was not even sure he would recognize it anymore. But that was the promise. After this mission, he would finally be done. No more hunts, no more late-night calls, no more blood-soaked snow. Just Marlene, the cabin, and the quiet. 5 minutes out, said Sandy Johnson through the headset, his voice calm and clipped. Sandy had been with him longer than anyone else. A good man, smart, steady. "You ready for this?" Sandy asked. Rico looked out over the frozen forest. Been ready for a long time. The pilot came over comms. "We're setting down near Fox Hollow Ridge. Weather's turning fast. 6-hour window before visibility goes to hell." The team of 6 sat in silence, checking rifles and gear. They were all veterans. No green recruits this time. Rico made sure of that. When the chopper dropped into a clearing, snow spun through the rotor wash like ash. The men piled out and got to work, rifles loaded, motion sensors deployed, and tranquilizer launchers primed. Rico crouched by a set of prints half buried in the snow. Massive, deep impressions, each step wide apart, weight heavy enough to compress the ice underneath. He touched the edge of one with a gloved hand, still sharp. "Fresh," he said, heading north. Sandy joined him, scanning the ridgeline. "You think it's the Alpha?" Only one way to find out. They moved out, spreading into a wide line as they pushed into the tree line. The light was dull and heavy, filtered through thick cloud. Snow fell in thin sheets, turning the forest into a pale, colorless maze. After 20 minutes, the quiet grew wrong. No birds, no creaking wood, no wind through the branches. Only the crunch of boots and the faint hiss of snow landing on their gear. Sandy glanced at Rico. "You feel that?" Rico nodded. "Yeah, something's got eyes on us." A voice came through the radio, low and tense. "Cap, movement up ahead. 1 o'clock." Rico lifted his rifle scope. Through the haze of falling snow, something stood on a rock outcrop about 100 yards ahead. A towering figure, motionless, pale as ice. The Alpha Dogman. Its fur shone almost silver in the light, blending with the frost, except for 2 thick black streaks running straight down from its eyes to its snout, like scars that never healed. Its chest expanded slowly as it breathed. It did not pace or snarl. It just stood there, watching them. "Holy hell," whispered one of the men. "That's it." Rico steadied his aim, but did not pull the trigger. The creature was not attacking. It was studying them, like it understood exactly what they were. "Hold fire," he ordered. The Alpha tilted its head slightly, like it was curious. The black marks on its face looked painted now, deliberate. Then it opened its mouth and howled. The sound tore through the valley like thunder rolling over ice. It was not the howl of an animal. It was a call, a command. Snow slid from the branches around them. "Contact, right," shouted one of the men. Rico turned. 5 shapes moved through the tree line, massive, low to the ground, gray and black fur streaked with dirt. They moved in formation, cutting through the snow with shocking speed. "Open fire," Rico yelled. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the frozen valley. Tracer rounds sliced through the air. One Dogman dropped instantly, tumbling through the snow, but the others did not slow. They darted between trees with uncanny coordination, circling the humans, forcing them into tighter ground. "Back! Stay tight!" Rico barked. A blur of movement came from his left. One of the men fired, dropping one mid-leap, but another hit him from behind, claws raking across his back before Rico and Sandy tore it off with a volley of rounds. He didn't get up. "Evac. We need evac now," Rico shouted into the comm. Static hissed, then command came back. "Negative. You're too deep. Hold your position." "They're pushing us uphill," Sandy shouted, firing another burst. Rico fired back-to-back shots, dropping a fourth Dogman. The fifth vanished into the fog, dragging one of Rico's men with it. The Alpha had disappeared from the ridge, but Rico knew it had not gone far. "They're flanking us," one of the men yelled, before being tackled and dragged off screaming. Bones could be heard crunching and snapping. His screams were short. "Fall back to the ridge," Rico ordered. They retreated fast, laying down bursts of suppressive fire. The snow churned beneath their boots, casings scattering across the ground. One of the gray Dogmen lunged from the tree line, but went down before it reached them. The rest vanished into the pines. Ahead, Rico spotted a shallow cave carved into the rock. He grabbed Sandy's arm and pointed. "There, go." They sprinted through the drifts, sliding inside the cave as bullets clinked against rock. The cold air burned their lungs. Rico pressed his back to the wall, breathing hard. Outside, the forest went quiet again. He risked a glance through the cave mouth. Snow fell soft and steady now, muting the world. The Alpha stood alone on the ridge, framed by the gray light. It did not move or roar. It just stared down at them, chest rising slow, head tilting as if to acknowledge them. Then it turned, stepping back into the trees without a sound. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Rico lowered his rifle, heart pounding. This hunt was not like the others. The thing out there was not a beast. It was a leader, a strategist. And it was only the beginning. Rico pressed his back against the cave wall, lungs burning from the cold. Snow drifted through the entrance, landing on his gloves and melting instantly. His rifle barrel smoked in the frigid air. Beside him, Sandy crouched low, swapping magazines with trembling hands. "You hit?" Rico asked, voice rough. Sandy shook his head. "No. You?" "I'm good." Rico leaned forward, peering out through the mouth of the cave. The forest beyond was quiet, except for the moaning wind. Branches shifted under the weight of snow. "They're not done. I can feel it." He keyed his radio. "Command, this is Hunter 6. We're down to 2. Coordinates uploaded. Need immediate evac." Static filled the channel. Then came the faint crackle of a strained voice. "Copy, Hunter 6. Birds inbound. 15 minutes. Hold tight." Rico lowered the radio. 15 minutes felt like forever. The wind outside rose and fell in strange patterns, as if the forest itself was breathing. Every so often, a low sound bled through the gusts, a guttural growl, distant but steady. Rico brushed snow from his rifle sight, eyes narrowing. Sandy moved closer to the entrance. "You see anything?" "Not yet," Rico said. "But they're close." He scanned the tree line. The gray light made it hard to tell where snow ended and fur began. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement behind a spruce trunk. Another flash to the left. The pack was circling again. Sandy raised his rifle. "We hold here." The first Dogman came from the right, charging low on all fours. Rico fired twice, hitting it mid-run. It collapsed, sliding in the snow, kicking once before going still. Another burst from Sandy's rifle took down the second that tried to follow. The valley filled with the sharp echo of gunfire and the hiss of snow tearing under weight. Then something heavy landed on the roof above them. The rock shook. Snow rained down into the cave as claws scraped overhead. Rico looked up, tracking the sound. "Topside!" Sandy shouted. Rico fired through the stone, short bursts that cracked the rock and sent dust into the air. The weight above shifted, then rolled off, thudding into the snow outside. "3 down," Rico said. The forest went quiet again. Too quiet. Rico reloaded, his fingers numb. He could feel his pulse in his ears. Sandy glanced at his watch. 8 minutes. Rico exhaled slowly, trying to ignore the way the cold crept through his armor. It's not over. It never is. That was when the shadow appeared. At first, he thought it was a trick of light, just fog moving through the trees. But then it stepped forward, silent, deliberate. The Alpha. It stood tall at the edge of the clearing, framed by gray sky and blowing snow. Its fur gleamed white, the black streaks over its eyes like twin scars that ran straight down its snout. The creature's chest rose and fell in slow rhythm. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching. Sandy whispered, "What's it doing?" Rico didn't answer. He couldn't. He had hunted hundreds of cryptids, but none had ever carried itself like this thing did. There was intent in its stillness, a kind of understanding that went far beyond instinct. Then, behind it, 2 dogmen emerged from the trees. Their movements were slower now, careful, as if waiting for a signal. Rico steadied his rifle. 3 left. That's all that's standing between us and getting home. Sandy's jaw tightened. Then we take them. The sound of rotors echoed faintly in the distance. The evac bird was closing in. Rico reached for a flare, cracked it, and threw it into the open. The red light hissed against the snow, bleeding color into the gray world. The dogman reacted instantly. One charged the flare, snarling. Rico took it down with a burst to the chest. Another came straight for the cave, claws digging deep into the snow. Sandy stepped forward and fired, each shot cutting through the cold until the creature stumbled and fell. The last one backed away, pacing along the tree line, eyes glowing faintly in the light. Then the Alpha moved. It stepped forward, shoulders rising and falling, like it was breathing fire into its lungs. The helicopter came into view behind it, the roar of the blades scattering loose snow across the ridge. The gunner opened up, rounds slicing into the ground around the Alpha. Trees splintered, bark exploded into the air. The dogman didn't flinch. It turned its head toward the noise, expression unreadable, then vanished into the trees in 3 powerful strides. "Move!" Rico shouted. He and Sandy sprinted from the cave, boots crashing through the snow. The helicopter dropped lower, gunner scanning the tree line. Rico grabbed the skid as it hovered above the ridge and hauled himself inside. Sandy followed, pulling himself up with a grunt. 2 aboard, the gunner yelled to the pilot. The chopper rose fast, wind tearing at their faces. The world below blurred into white and green as the forest fell away beneath them. Rico leaned against the doorframe, breathing hard, eyes scanning the ridge. Nothing moved below. No sign of the Alpha or its pack. Just the wrecked snowfield and scattered bodies of men and monsters alike. Sandy sat back against the wall, sweat freezing on his forehead. "You think Command's gonna call this a win?" Rico stared out the window, jaw tight. "They'll call it whatever makes them sleep at night." The pilot's voice came through the headset. "We're 30 clicks from base. Prep for debrief." Rico nodded but said nothing. His hands were still shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper. The mission was supposed to be routine, but it had turned into something far worse. The Alpha had shown planning, patience, and precision. And Rico knew one thing for certain as the base came into view. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were just lucky to be alive. The helicopter blade slowed as the chopper settled onto the landing pad outside the remote facility. Snow swirled in circles under the floodlights, the Alaskan wind howling through the hangars. Rico and Sandy stepped out, both of them limping slightly, both too numb to feel the cold anymore. Inside the hangar, the heat hit hard. The place smelled like oil and metal. Men in gray uniforms moved back and forth, pretending not to stare. The survivors always drew eyes. A medic intercepted them near the entrance. "Report to debrief immediately," she said. "Colonel's waiting." Rico nodded, pushing past her. He didn't want a blanket or water. He wanted to forget the sounds of screaming in the snow. They walked through narrow corridors, lined with buzzing lights until they reached the briefing chamber. The walls were concrete, windowless, and smelled of damp steel. Colonel Everett sat behind a long metal table, a folder laid neatly before him. His uniform was pressed, not a hair out of place. "Take a seat," Everett said. His voice carried the kind of authority that made most men sit without question. Rico stayed standing. Sandy dropped into the chair beside him, too tired to care. Everett opened the folder, eyes moving slowly down the report. "You were sent to Kenai Peninsula to capture or neutralize one Dogman specimen. Instead, you return with 5 men dead and no body." Rico's jaw flexed. "You gave us bad intel." Everett looked up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Rico said. "You told us there was one target, maybe 2. There was an entire pack out there, and an alpha that knew exactly what it was doing. We were walking blind into an ambush." Everett folded his hands, calm but sharp. "Our intelligence was based on the most recent data we had. Conditions change." "Conditions don't kill 5 men," Rico said. "Bad orders do." The colonel's expression didn't shift. "You've been in this program long enough to know the risks. You were trained to adapt." Rico leaned on the table, his stare unflinching. "Don't talk to me about training. I did my job. I went where you sent me, did what nobody else would do. This was my last mission. I am done." Everett leaned back slightly. "You think you can just walk away?" "I've earned it," Rico said. "I've done more than my share. I've spent half my life in the woods, cleaning up your mistakes. It ends here." Everett's tone sharpened. "It ends when that thing is dead or in containment. Not before." Rico let out a bitter laugh. "Containment? You can't contain something that thinks. That alpha wasn't some wild animal. It was planning. Watching, waiting for us to show up. You think another team is going to do better? You're the only one with first-hand experience," Everett said. "That makes you an asset. And until that creature is neutralized, your retirement is suspended." Rico stepped closer, fists clenched at his sides. "Suspended? You think you can hold me here?" Everett smiled faintly. "I don't think, Smith. I know. You signed a lifetime clearance contract. You're still under federal directive until we release you. That alpha is still breathing, which means your job isn't finished." Sandy stood slowly, tension radiating from him. "He's done, Colonel. You can send whoever you want, but he's out." Everett's eyes flicked toward him. "You're dismissed, Johnson. Go get cleared by medical before I have you removed." Sandy didn't move at first. Rico gave a slight nod, and he reluctantly left the room. The door closed behind him, sealing Rico and Everett in silence. Rico leaned forward, voice low. "You can order me all you want, but I'm finished. You can't make me go back out there." Everett's stare hardened. "You're a soldier, Smith. You don't get to decide when the war ends. That thing is our responsibility, and until it's contained, so are you. Rico stepped back, shaking his head slowly. You're sending men to die for your pride. That's not duty, that's arrogance. Everett rose from his chair. Call it whatever you want. You're still going. Rico turned for the door. Not this time. You walk out of here, Smith, Everett said quietly. No pension, no clearance, no life outside this facility. You'll lose everything you think you've earned. Rico stopped in the doorway. For a moment, the air felt heavy. Then he turned slightly, eyes cold and steady. All I ever earned was peace. You're not taking that from me. Everett said nothing, just stared as Rico left the room. He walked down the corridor in silence, past the medbay and the control rooms humming with screens. Every man he passed stepped aside. They all knew that look, the one you get when you've already decided something. No order can change. Outside, the snow was falling again, soft and slow. The chopper he'd arrived in sat covered in frost. Sandy waited near the hangar doors, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Well? He asked. Rico zipped his jacket up to his neck. They're not letting me retire until that alpha's gone. Sandy frowned. You gonna listen? Rico looked toward the tree line beyond the fence, where the wilderness stretched black and endless. I'll decide that myself. He started walking toward the barracks. The floodlights burned against the falling snow, casting his shadow long across the ground. Behind him, the siren of another departing chopper echoed through the valley. Another team heading into the wild. Rico didn't look back. He knew what waited out there. He'd seen its eyes, and somewhere in the cold, dark woods, the alpha dogman was already watching again. The hunt wasn't over, but this time it wasn't about orders. It was personal. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown for more horror content. If you have any real cryptid encounters, or you're a horror writer wanting to share your stories, please feel free to email me in the description anytime.